Kenmore City Council is now in session. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Here.
Councilmember Kugler.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Herbig.
Here.
Councilmember File.
Here.
Mayor Baker.
Here.
Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
Councilmember O'Kane has been excused.
And if you will please all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with
liberty,
liberty
justice
and
for all.
justice for
I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional land of the first people of Kenmore and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Coast Salish peoples who thrive in this place, alive and strong. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. If there are no objections, the agenda will stand approved as written. Next item is a presentation, the pop-up vaccine clinic update with Todd Wollum from the Shoreline Fire Department. Todd, if you please.
Good evening. How are you guys doing today?
Great.
Good. So just giving you a quick update on the pop-up vaccine clinic we did this last Wednesday, the 9th at the Kenmore Community Club. So we did, it was a second dose clinic. So we'd already been there 3 weeks prior. The first dose clinic, we did almost 60 doses at the Kenmore Community Club. And then this last week on the 9th, we did 20 second doses and then 4 first doses. So trying to get out and make vaccines a little more accessible to people that might be a little bit more hesitant to go get them. So it's a partnership between University of Washington, Shoreline Fire Department, North Shore Fire Department. And we still currently have a fixed vaccination site up in Shoreline at the Shoreline Center, which is open until July 20th. And that's the end of our contract with the University of Washington to provide second doses or vaccines. Do you guys have any questions as far as the Shoreline and North Shore Fire Departments assisting with vaccines or anything about the vaccination process as a whole?
Any questions? Doesn't appear to. Thank you very much.
Oh, you are very welcome. And a big shout out to Councilmember Karina File. She is the one that really spearheaded this and was very tenacious on getting the pop-up clinics to be down in Kenmore. So thank you, Councilmember File.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You bet. You guys have a good evening.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comments. Madam Clerk, would you please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Baker. We want to welcome all of our guests to tonight's council meeting. In this forum, the council cannot engage or dialogue with the public because the primary role of the council is to listen. All comments must be addressed to the mayor and the city council. Please use your raise hand feature right now if you wish to speak. I will acknowledge your request and call your name when it's your turn. Your time will start when we can confirm that we hear you. Please state your name, city of residence for the record, and keep your comments to the allotted 3 minutes. Your time cannot be granted to another, and your clock time will not be reset unless there are extenuating circumstances and the presiding officer has expressly allowed it. Screen sharing is not allowed. You are welcome to submit materials to the council or the clerk in advance. This meeting is being recorded, and we thank you again for taking the time to express your comments. Mayor Baker, I see quite a few hands raised already, and I think I'd like to take them in this order. Starting with Rhiannon Dorian, Heidi Shepard, Reese Dorian, Patrick O'Brien, Chris Graves. Rhiannon, can you hear us?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Rhiannon Dorian. I live in the city of Kenmore, and I would like to comment to the mayor and the council about the pride flag. When the pride flag was raised, I was very excited because as a member of the LGBTQ AI2S+ community, I was very proud. But a week or so later, I realized while passing by small, big, and little flags, I realized that this would all go away at the end of the month. And I thought to myself, I don't want this. I don't want just a monthly celebration. I want to know that I can always be welcome. And it made me start thinking about others who are exactly like me. And I think to myself, when people come in who are members of the LGBTQ AI2S+ community, and they see the pride flag, they know that they can stay here and know that they are safe. So that's why I propose to the council that we keep the pride flag raised all year long, so that Kenmore will be known as a place where everyone is safe and welcome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Heidi Shepherd. Heidi, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Heidi Shepherd, and I'm here from the city of Shoreline, where I reside, but I'm also here from the North Urban Human Services Alliance, or NUSA. I'm here tonight to encourage the adoption of the renter protections that you're considering later. A particular thank you to the council and to council members Herbig and File for their initiative and action. This ordinance is critical to the housing stability of the citizens of Kenmore, and I salute you for discussing it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Reese Dorian.
Hi there.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Reese Dorian. I live in the city of Kenmore, and I would also like to propose to the council that we keep the pride flag raised all year round. I would like to personally agree with my sister that we should keep the pride flag raised all year round. I already mentioned that, I think. Though I am personally not a member of the LGBTQ IA2S+ community, I would like to support my sister because she is. I want Kenmore to be considered a safe and welcoming place to people, no matter what race, faith, whatever they are, or who they love, or, whatever. So that is why I would also like to propose to the council that we keep the pride flag raised all year round. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Reese.
You're welcome.
Patrick O'Brien.
Hi there. Good evening, Pat O'Brien, Kenmore, Washington. First of all, I think that I'd like to thank Stacy Melendez for her continued work with various community members on the mobile home park issue, food issue, COVID issue, gay rights issues, all these issues she's spearheading and working every day. So thank you, Stacy, for that good work. I'd also like to state that the City Council 2021-2022 number 2 priority is the development of Kenmore climate plan and promote environmental stewardship, including water, air, forest, and habitat restoration. First of all, we'd have to start with the Kenmore asphalt plant, as is we have not dealt with that issue yet. They have no valid permit because they have encroached and broken the grandfather clause, and you do have the right to constrict their activity at this point. So far, there's been no enforcement, and that is not only the problem of Puget Sound Clean Air, which is anything but that, but it's also a problem for the city to ensure the public health. And we've had a great amount of asphalt being produced this week in Kenmore. We also have the illegal development of Lake Point per state Supreme Court ruling 01-2-22187-6 SEA. There's the court ruling. I have the court ruling if you want it. Yes, for some reason it's not coming through here. But anyway, I've got a copy, a certified copy of it. And you can't develop that property until you've dealt with the Washington State Supreme Court. And you've done nothing but waste money on it with multiple potential suckers that are trying to be duped in there when we have a massive cleanup, very toxic landfill. If you've read the evidence that the state used against Pioneer Towing. Chemicals used on invasive species and algae are talking to some of the people that live along the lake or operate businesses and look at the profile of nutrients, everything else, because there's hot spots due to man's activity. We need wellness on the waterfront. We have the need to use clean and wash gravel in the parking at the Squires Landing Park. Remember, electric cars are going to be 40 to 60% of that total by 2030.
Mr. Graves.
Hi, my name is Chris Graves. I thank the council for having me today for my comments. I'm an attorney at the Housing Justice Project in King County, the King County Bar Association. We provide free legal aid to low-income renters facing eviction in King County. I am calling to stress how important it is that this council pass strong renter protections and quickly before the moratorium is set to expire at the end of the month. In particular, with regard to elder abuse, seniors are especially vulnerable to evictions and increased chances of housing instability due to fixed incomes and inability to work due to disability or age discrimination. And so therefore, the constituents, the people you represent in Kenmore, I believe they need action. They need safe, stable housing. They need to remain in their homes as our cities begin to recover from the pandemic. Renter protections do not prevent landlords from providing housing. In fact, it prevents renters from being homeless. And if the landlords just simply want the rent paid, there is nearly $165 million in rental assistance funds available. They should be required to access it, and evictions should be an absolute last measure. Therefore, we and I are encouraging the council to extend that moratorium, to create a defense to eviction for COVID-related debt, and implement some permanent protections. I have next to me my 6-year-old son. And one of the reasons that evictions and eviction prevention is so important is because women and children are at the greatest risk of prevention, at the greatest risk of evictions. And evictions are a leading cause of homelessness, furthering instability for adults and children. And only 12.5% of evicted persons found new housing, while the rest suffered from housing instability or homelessness. And moreover, finally, many homeless shelters do not allow boys over the age of 12 or unique family compositions, in other words, grandmothers or extended family living with them to be admitted, risking family separation. And 85.7% of those evicted with school-aged children had to move schools, further creating instability. So again, we urge this council.
When are we done?
Give me just a moment.
It's so long.
Okay. So I'm sure everyone else feels like that. So we urge this council to pass some strong protections for renters. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. The next group of guests we'd like to call will take in this order: David Morton, David Stokes, Shannon Kirshner, Randy Benneker, Tram, Stacy V, Sebastian Stockwell, and David Dorian. Mr. Morton?
Evening, council members. I'm David Morton. I live near Redmond. At the Cadman asphalt plant in Kenmore and the Watson asphalt plant in Redmond, a tank truck is often parked in the yard near the on-site asphalt cement tanks. These tank trucks are supposed to haul performance-grade asphalt cement, or PG binders, to the asphalt facilities. PSCAA should be taking care to ensure that these hot mix asphalt facilities are using PG binders, which should contain very low levels of VOCs. But for years, a horrible stench similar to the odors of VOCs like benzene, ethylbenzene, toluene, and xylene is often emitted by these asphalt plants. These hazardous chemicals should have already been removed at the refinery before a hot mix asphalt facility gets the asphalt cement. A tank truck filled with cutback asphalt looks just like a tank truck filled with PG grade asphalt cement. If cutback asphalt were used as binder at these plants, tons of toxic VOCs would be emitted into the air breathed by thousands of people, and it would create a horrible stench like the stench emitted by the Watson and Cadman asphalt plants. This is why many cities don't permit heavily polluting industry to be located near residential areas, parks, schools, and office parks. Chapter 5.10.20 of Kenmore Municipal Code recognizes that the Cadman asphalt batch plant is a, quote, heavy manufacturing business engaged in the mechanical transformation of materials into new products that generates levels of noise, pollution, vibration, dust, fumes, odors, poisons, or other hazardous materials, and causing fire or explosion hazards or other undesirable conditions that are injurious to health or offensive to the senses, and are an obstruction to the free use of surrounding property and essentially interferes with the comfortable enjoyment of life and property, end quote. Kenmore's Criminal Code 9.5.380, Inhaling Toxic Fumes, adopts RCW 947A, which makes it unlawful for any person to induce any other person to smell or inhale the fumes of any type of substance containing a solvent which releases toxic vapors or fumes which cause a condition of or induce symptoms of intoxication, dizziness, stupefaction, or dulling of the senses, and or change, distort, or disturb the audio, visual, or mental processes, end quote. Such violations of criminal code ought to be investigated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morton. David Stokes?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my name's Dave Stokes. I'm a Kenmore resident and professor at UW-Bothell. For the past 3 years, I've been conducting wildlife studies in St. Edward State Park using camera traps along with my students. And we've discovered an amazing diversity of wildlife there. Bobcats, otters, flying squirrels, Townsend's chipmunk, and a whole bunch of others I wish I could show you, but I can't share my screen. But what's become clear in the course of this study is that St. Edward is really a unique treasure in the whole Seattle metro area, treasure of biodiversity. But what's also become very clear is that St. Edward is too small by itself to support the wildlife that's there. The inescapable conclusion is that wildlife is actually using other areas of North Shore. We're living with that wildlife. Wildlife is outside the park. They're using our neighborhoods, traveling through our neighborhoods, and basically living with us. The bottom line is, if we want wildlife to persist in St. Edward, we need to make our neighborhoods more wildlife friendly to support it where it's also living. In response to that reality, we've just recently started a community science project, wildlife science project, to better understand how wildlife is using the North Shore area outside of parks. The ultimate goal is to learn how we can better coexist with the wildlife that we share the habitat with. And our approach is to enlist the public to participate by operating a wildlife camera on their property or on nearby green space, and to monitor the wildlife activity at their location. And we hope to have at least 40 cameras out within the next few weeks. Right, it's a brand new project. Right now we have about 25 cameras deployed at this point, operated by some people like you folks, just ordinary citizens who are helping us with this scientific project. So my reason for presenting tonight is first to tell you about this project, because I think it's a really cool project. It's important for conservation, and I think it's important for the quality of life in Kenmore. Second, to let everyone know about the project in case you would like to participate as a citizen scientist. Anyone with the interest can do it. You can go to the St. Edward EERC, St. Edward Environmental Education and Research Center website, and you can find information on our project there, how to sign up. There's a form you can fill out and all that sort of information. The third reason I'm talking to you is that we're hoping to get permission for camera locations on some public lands that perhaps Kenmore owns. So I'm hopeful that we can do that, and I'm talking with City Manager about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stokes. Shannon Kirschner? You're muted.
Got it?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Hello, Mayor Baker and members of the council. I'm a Kenmore resident. I have a family member who's trans, and I want her to feel welcome in the community. I'd like to request and advocate that the city install inclusive signage at the hangar for the restrooms so that there can be a sign that says, "You're welcome to use the restroom that aligns with your gender identity." I'd also like to advocate for the flag during Pride Month. I think it'd be awesome to have it year round. That would be fabulous. I'd also love to see the flag be inclusive of transgender and other gender expressions, sexual orientations, to the effect that you have the rainbow flag and then you have that cutout that has the different colors. I would really love to see that, because that includes my daughter and many others that aren't currently under the rainbow flag. So yeah, that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Randy Beneker?
Mr. Mayor, council members, is my audio working?
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you. My name is Randy Banneker. I'm here on behalf of the Seattle-King County Realtors, and I wanted to comment on proposed ordinance 210525, the landlord tenant protections. We often don't engage in landlord tenant issues. We're engaging on this because many of our members work with small landlords, people that own 1 to 5 units, and some of our members own their own units. We are hearing of tremendous financial strain from these small property owners and uncertainty that added tenant protections place on them in terms of meeting their bills, their mortgage. We've seen double-digit property tax increases and certainly utility rates. Bills that are due whether or not their rental units are producing income. And these units are important because they often offer some natural affordability. Small landlords typically value keeping those units occupied as opposed to, keeping the rent on an upward trajectory. And so I just ask you to think about these folks. I mean, you've seen some op-eds in the Seattle Times, I think, that a lot of people are considering selling. And I think that's a problem, because I think that does start to erode the natural affordability that occurs, and it erodes the investment in your community. Now, certainly we are still working through COVID, and I wanted to speak in support of the proposed amendments that the Washington Multifamily Housing Association communicated to you, because I think they narrow and make the ordinance more manageable and understandable, more certain for my members. And that is amending Section 2 to limit a prohibition on evictions for non-payment of rent only. Amending Section 3 to require proof on the part of the tenant that eviction is related to COVID-19. And amend Section 5, which mandates application of rental assistance programs, even when those assistance programs may not cover the entirety of the rent owing. I just ask you to consider those. I think they offer some improvements and meet your goals of continuing to help people in need during COVID. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Tram?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Good evening. My name is Tran Larson, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager at the Housing Justice Project. We provide free legal aid to low-income renters facing eviction in King County, and I'm calling to encourage this council to adopt Ordinance 21-0525. So 2020's point in time count showed that there was a 5% increase in homelessness from the year prior. So we have a housing crisis that existed long before the pandemic even started. Over 200,000 households in Washington are behind on rent, according to the U.S. Pulse survey from April, and an estimated 60,000 of those are in King County alone. If we estimate just 2 to 3 people per household, we are looking at 120 to 180,000 individuals at risk for homelessness, which would completely collapse our human services system come July 1st. The state legislation that passed does not prevent local jurisdictions from passing their own stronger protections. Representative Macri has stated that was not her intention and encourages cities to do better, and we know Kenmore can do better. King County has $165 million in rental assistance funds, but organizations need time to set up the infrastructure to distribute those funds. And likewise, legal aid clinics need time to hire and train up new attorneys so renters can actually exert their right to counsel. If landlords, including the small landlords, just need rent paid so they can pay their property taxes, there is funding available and they should be required to access it first before moving for eviction. Many public comments tonight have expressed support and calls of inclusivity and equality. Housing is a racial justice issue that largely impacts Black folks, who make up less than 7% of the county's population, yet we're represented in 34% of all evictions filed. There was a land acknowledgement that was done at the beginning of this meeting. But what good is a land acknowledgement when Indigenous folks make up 1% of the county's population, but 15% of those experiencing homelessness? They need action to protect them instead of leaving them vulnerable to further displacement. Housing is an LGBTQIA+ issue. 1 in 4 trans folks experiences housing discrimination, and almost 1 in 4 LGBTQ Black youth have experienced homelessness. So this isn't about property rights. At the end of the day, this is about human rights. So we're encouraging council to extend the moratorium, create a defense to eviction for COVID-related debt, and implement permanent protections. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stacy V.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you, David, Patrick, and the environmentally concerned residents that in 2007 first brought the concerns about the asphalt emissions in our ambient air forward. First in 2007, then in 2017, and again in 2019. The city is failing at protecting the residents, their property, and families at Town Square and throughout Kenmore, as well as in Redmond alike. We need to have the testing at the asphalt and cement plants to see that they are actually not having VOCs and PHs, and continue periodically to support cleaner processes. We know of 3 neighborhoods with too many neighbors suffering for cancer. We would hope that you would take care of this. The City Council states that affordable housing and climate action are their top 2 priorities. I am confused as the city does not seem to follow the rate it has them high on the work docket. Affordable housing is number 13 and climate action is number 16. Yet the Lake Point wasting of dollars and consultants considers to be listed at number 5. We need the city and the council to show us the action and direct the staff the same way. We need the extension of the COVID-19 tenants moratorium and Bill 5160 with your ordinance Landlord Tenants Act to protect our most vulnerable, our seniors, veterans, disabled, unemployed, low and fixed income residents. We residents have also come forward with too many of the tree canopy being cleared. We need you to act now. We need you to fill your claim of environmental stewards and show climate action now by requiring the testing and continue monitoring of the asphalt plants for clean processing and implement the tree canopy ordinance changes now. We also need to protect our Achadiz Park from cement and asphalt use. Use only environmentally friendly material near our shoreline, creeks, and habitats. And I suggest that they put a camera there so that you could see how much wildlife will be deterred and hurt by these changes that you want to make. Please, we rely on you to implement our residents' needs and concerns. Do the right thing to protect our environment, our community, our residents. And also, by protocol, it was Flag Day and the POW flag was to fly on Flag Day. So that's kind of disappointing that, you know, those flag protocols are not being followed. I'm all for the pride flag flying, but we also need to respect our veterans because they sacrificed so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Valenzuela. Sebastian Stockpile?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Sebastian Stockpile, and I'm a staff attorney with the Housing Justice Project, providing legal representation to low-income renters in King County facing eviction. And I'm also a resident of District 8 in Seattle. I'm calling in support of ordinance number 21-0525 related to additional renter protections in Kenmore. Throughout the pandemic, marginalized renters have experienced the highest rates of contracting COVID and loss of income. While some protections, such as a statewide moratorium, provided some temporary protections for renters, the moratorium is set to expire and an already terrible housing crisis is set to become exponentially worse without additional renter protections. Recovery of renter health in Kenmore and Washington in general will not be immediate, but ordinance number 21-0525 provides renters with important protections that increase the likelihood that renters, people, families, children will stay housed, not be made homeless by eviction for non-payment during a pandemic. Let's not discard the frontline workers that we applauded throughout this pandemic, and instead, let's protect the most vulnerable renters in Kenmore by implementing these renter protections. Actions speak louder than words. I encourage this entire committee to support and recommend passage of ordinance 21-0525. We need renter protections that go hand in hand with the right to counsel that was recently passed. Give renters and the attorneys who represent them a fighting chance to keep renters housed in Kenmore. Pass renter protections that are not watered down. Evictions are not a solution to the housing crisis that existed before this pandemic, and it's sure not the solution now that we're trying to survive one. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Stockpile. David Dorian?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi there, my name is David Dorian. I'm a resident of Kenmore. I am also speaking in support of Ordinance 21-0525 and also of extending an eviction moratorium throughout the end of this year. First, I would like to thank Council and specifically Council members File and Herbig for their leadership on this issue. So many renters in Kenmore and across King County are really struggling with rental debt due to the COVID-19 pandemic and its effects, and they need time to get back on their feet. The important protections in the ordinance will help prevent homelessness and make sure that landlords are accessing rental assistance instead of evicting. I encourage you to pass this legislation in as robust a manner as possible to provide tenants with a defense to eviction and encourage landlords towards seeking rental assistance. As the Transit Riders Union notes in their comments, I believe this should include striking any language that might confuse the intent of the ordinance and weaken the protections intended for renters. Forcing additional ambiguous burdens of proof on them at an already challenging time would be inequitable, as we've heard other speakers say, and would not be an improvement toward meeting the goals of the ordinance as intended, but would rather undermine those goals. I thank you for your leadership on this ordinance, and I cede the rest of my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dorian. Mayor Baker, I see no further hands raised.
Anybody else wishing to be heard?
I now see Miss Elizabeth Mooney. Miss Mooney?
Mrs. Mooney.
Elizabeth Mooney, can you hear us? It looks like she may have dropped off. If there's anyone else that would like to speak today, the time to raise your hand is now.
Hi.
Mooney, we can hear you.
Great. I pushed the wrong button on the panelist or attendee, I guess. Thank you for your patience. Elizabeth Mooney, member and citizen of Kenmore. I just want to come in and say that I fully support what Stacy Valenzuela said tonight, especially about the environment. We're at a point now in the beginning of summer to appreciate the natural resources that our city has. And I would ask City Council and staff to focus right now, while we have long days, on what is healthy and what is the truth and what is a conversation that we can have about our public natural resources and where we can potentially expand upon them to have our public enjoy clean water, clean air, healthy trees, fishing, and enjoying what is healthy to enjoy in Kenmore. And I believe that we need the City Council's help in having some meetings outside while the weather is good and having conversations socially distanced or at any of the public places that we're allowed to be at right now. But I think it's a great opportunity to focus on what is in Kenmore and what we can expand on in healthy ways. But we have to share our information as a community about what we have. And some of that includes the emissions from the asphalt facility. And I'll just stop there because I want to bring my grandkids out there to fish. But we have to share what's good and bad about some of the fish, because there have been lots of pollutants that put bad poisons into fish. So getting out on the Kenmore dock this summer and educating about which are the fish to keep and which are the fish to throw back in would be great. And maybe we can start there with a fun afternoon educating about fish and clean water and clean air and how to communicate with the City Council and staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mayor Baker, there are two final hands, Janet Hayes and Vicki Grayland. Janet Hayes. Janet, can you hear us?
Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Oh, thank you. My name is Janet Hayes and I'm a resident of Kenmore. I want to especially thank David Morton for what he spoke of tonight. He has delivered a message for weeks, for many of your meetings. Is anyone hearing him? Very important. I daily, Monday through Friday, smell asphalt fumes off and on in my home, lingering all day though. By the end of the day, it's very obvious. But going to the Kenmore Concerns link on your site is difficult at best. It's impossible to get through to that and live your life because you have to wait for someone to come. Bridget's always been fast for me though, but I have heard that it takes days sometimes for Puget Sound Clean Air Agency to get involved. I know that for a fact. That has happened to me years past. My concern is that nothing is happening since this has been made very public, not for the first time, but with numbers behind us. So I'd like some kind of forward movement. The other thing I want to ask about is the Kenmore Town Square. I have a question for the council because I had looked up the Kenmore Town Square when I saw that there was a restaurant providing food right next to it and taking up half of the square that was used for movies in the past during the summer. And I wondered if the council voted to allow a restaurant to use half of that property. I'll read one line that you have, the city has there. This young city sought to create a civic core, and in 2017, the city of Kenmore hired Hewitt to create a community-owned, multifunctional urban amenity that would serve the growing needs of its citizens. Did something change and I didn't hear about it? I would like to know who supported it and went forward and allowed it, because there are people that maybe can't afford the restaurant, but would sure like to be in that area and have some events like it mentions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. Vicki Grayland.
Hi, I'm Vicki Grayland and I live in Kenmore. I wanted to follow up on a couple of things that I talked about at the last meeting. Number one is the epidemiological study that I requested. And I want to thank Mayor Baker for calling me on Tuesday just to promise that he would bring that up at the King County Health Board meeting, which is this Thursday at 1 o'clock. The Zoom link is right on the King County website. I encourage everyone to attend and support this. I think this is very important that we have some data on the effects of the emissions from the asphalt plant. We're not going to get any data from the asphalt plant. So I think it's a good idea to go for this study of what the emissions do within the plume of the emissions. And I also wanted to thank the city for inviting me to attend the city's first climate action community meeting. I thought it was a great start. I was very heartened by my fellow citizens of Kenmore. People had a real social justice approach to climate action. And I'm happy to live in a community that values social justice and equity. And I also want to thank Nigel Herbrick, our deputy mayor, for his social justice stance of requesting that we have direct payments to people who really need it with our COVID relief money. I was not heartened by some of the comments I heard at the last meeting. I thought the ghost of Ronald Reagan was in the room. There was talk of the right people getting the money for the right reasons, and there was talk of avoiding people who will commit fraud. I thought the next thing I was going to hear about was welfare queens. Please, the people who need this help are more likely to avoid applying for it. I don't want to hear this kind of talk in my town from people that I voted for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Grayland. Mayor Baker, there are no more hands raised.
Anybody else wishing to be heard? Anybody else wishing to be heard? Hearing or seeing nobody come forward, I want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and address the council. We do care very much what your feelings are and what you have to say. We really want to hear. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Councilmember File.
And I will second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda stands approved unanimously. Next item on the agenda is business agenda, and we'll start with the tree preservation recommendations presented by our senior planner, Samantha Loyak.
I'll kick it off here, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. And I see Samantha's promoted, so we may have some technical questions, and she's around to answer those. And so, as you all remember, at the April 19th meeting, Samantha did a wonderful presentation for you on our tree regulations. And as part of the presentation, we put together some items, what we called list 1 and 2, which were made up of approximately 11 different programs that we think we could either do this calendar year or postpone them until future calendar years. The items on list 1 were a little bit easier to accomplish and a little lower hanging fruit. That's why we thought we could get those accomplished this year and keeping on track with our other workload items. And item number 2 would take a little bit more resources, staff time, and other types of work to get accomplished. But as part of the presentation and discussion at the April 19th council meeting, you guys asked us to take a look at those lists again to see if there were any possibilities for moving any of the items from list 2 to list 1. And after doing so and talking to the rest of the staff, the city staff that would need to be involved with these items and doing this workload this year, we are recommending to stay with the previously recommended list 1 to get accomplished this year, and wait to do list 2 in prior years or workloads. Are there any questions about list 1 or 2 or?
Any questions? Hearing none. Things that have happened, I think, since our last meeting. Councilmember File? Councilmember File, we can't hear you.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. I just want to thank our city staff and Ms. Samantha Look for all your hard work on putting this together. We really appreciate and value and respect your time and effort. This is really important to our community and the future of Kenmore and the preservation of Kenmore. And it's unique beauty that it gives back to our surrounding communities. So I hear you on list 2. I do hope that in the future we can look at even networking with a nonprofit partner to put forward a tree rebate program to oversee that can reduce the work for the city or the cumbersome work for the city, and yet be able to fully function and operate a tree rebate program. A very practiced other places. I know agencies in our surrounding area, like Futerra, are very popular. Of course, King County has a 3,000 trees goal in the Strategic Climate Action Plan with Dow Constantine's initiative. That being said, it seems like there are some local partners that do exactly this, nonprofit partners. And I don't know if any thought or consideration went into that perspective.
Brian?
Pardon, Samantha?
Oh, did you want to say anything, Brian?
Yes, I did. I didn't know if Mayor wanted to answer any questions from any other council members before I had a statement.
Yeah, I really appreciate the work on this, and I noticed in the memo that you're even going to be leveraging our precious summer intern for prioritizing this work and working on a couple of items from list 2. So I just wanted to underscore that it seems like you've really gone above and beyond even that initial commitment of list 1, unless I'm misreading this.
No, you're not. And that's what I was going to comment about, that we did hire a summer intern, Garrett Oppenheim, who's going to be helping us work on a couple of the items from list 2 policy papers, which includes the tree rebate program. So we should have some more information for you in a couple months, and definitely for something for you to look at during your annual retreat next year.
Councilmember Marshall.
So that's great. If we've got actually movement towards list 2 and via the intern, that's outstanding. And I really appreciate, you're looking at it from our last suggestions. And I also hope that all of us can, as we make decisions wherever applicable and as appropriate, think about if those affect the tree canopy or how they affect trees. We can also try to wrap this into a lot of the decisions we make. So I'd ask everybody to think about that too. And thank you again, Mr. Hampson.
You're welcome. I see Garrett was promoted to a panelist here. I don't know if he wanted to say anything or introduce himself. Rob, have you had a chance to introduce Garrett to the council yet?
No, I haven't. I don't think I warned him that he would be showing his face. So
okay, we could do that some other time.
But Garrett, you're welcome to say hi. Oh, there he is. You're muted. There.
Hi, everybody. I'm Garrett Oppenheim. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm looking forward to working on these 2 policy papers over the course of the summer here, and hopefully presenting those to you guys later, August or September or something like that. I think that's what Rob was planning. I haven't made a lot of progress yet, so I don't have anything to report yet, but I have gotten started.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Kugler.
Not a question, but also just wanted to make a comment that I appreciate that the staff really heard us and even initiated the application for financial support for the possible tree rebate program, as well as a further canopy assessment. So thank you for hearing us and moving this forward.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, Samantha, for filing that application.
Any other questions? I really appreciate what the city is doing. However, since I think our last meeting, we had, I think 7 or 8 over 200-foot trees cut down. That was permitted by the city, allowed by the city because of our tree regulations. That depending upon the size of the lot, you can cut down up to 8 trees or more. And we're talking very, very significant trees. Like I said, well over 200 feet, some 3, 4, 5 feet in diameter. We're not talking inches. And the fact that we allow that to happen, I think is really wrong. And I understand staff workload, but I think maybe an easy fix would be put a moratorium on cutting down trees, except for the severely diseased ones that need to come down. And I would love to see us move in that direction to stop some of this clear cutting. We've had more trees, another lot clear cut on 170th Street here, and a group of 5 houses go up. So I think while staff is stressed, with the workload and they can't really take on much more, and list 1 is certainly admirable, I really think a moratorium on tree cutting should be put into effect. Councilmember File, I see your hand is up again.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. I just really want to also follow up and thank my fellow council members for acknowledging those list 2 items in the memo. I do like to practice a method that's human-centered leadership. And so bringing our community along with us in discussions that we've already prior had and that they may not be part of or have opportunity to be part of. And so when I asked my question of our city staff representative, it was to bring him with us. And I want to thank Councilmember Shrevenick for leaning into that and the others. So thank you very much. And thank you again to our staff for your hard work on this.
Any more questions? Councilmember Fowle, do you have another question? I see your hands up. If there's no further questions, we thank you very much for your report.
All right. Thank you.
You're moving forward on this. All right. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 21-364, establishing city policies for sustainable green purchasing of goods and services, presented by our Environmental Services Manager, Mr. Richard Sawyer. Mr. Sawyer, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Can you hear me? Good. So at a prior council retreat, council had requested that staff develop a sustainable green purchasing policy in order to provide some general guidance for the procurement of goods and services used by the city. And staff have worked to develop those policies, and we are recommending those be adopted through Resolution 21-364. And the resolution is before you, and scrolling down. So it's pretty short and to the point. So in the, as any goods and services are being looked to be acquired, we've proposed that, staff kind of follow through these guidelines and consider using these sustainable or green options before and they purchase anything, and as they looking through the requirements of what they need to purchase. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take those. I've also got Jennifer Gordon with me, who would probably handle most of the purchasing for most of the city's facilities in particular. So we're happy to take any questions as you're taking a look at the resolution.
Questions? Councilmember Shrevenick, there you go.
Well, first, I just want to thank you for putting this together. I know Councilmember Herbig probably 4 years ago brought this up, or 3 years ago. I know I brought it up as part of the Climate Action Plan in January 2020. So this has been on our minds for a long time. This is terrific. I think it's great. I just want to thank you for that. I wasn't sure whether in the 1 to 5, maybe it's assumed, but that we would look for purchasing items that literally have reduced emissions. So for example, electric cars. And I just wasn't sure whether 1 to 5 captured that direct issue. The preamble to it and the paragraph above it. Anyway, I just wasn't sure.
Yeah, and that's a good question. And yes, moving forward, electric vehicles would be the type of purchases that we would definitely want to apply this lens through. And this is also written in a way that, this kind of gets our foot in the door, but we can develop more specific policy moving forward, as in Section 2 was kind of meant that, as technologies develop and we would want to develop a more specific purchasing policy for something like electric vehicles, we can expand on this and provide even more detail if that's the direction we want to go. But yes, this would apply to electric vehicles as any other product that we would purchase. And we have, started moving this direction even, before, this kind of makes it official, but with our just kind of our commuting car fleet, for instance, we've been moving towards electric vehicle purchases, and we have installed chargers at City Hall to charge those vehicles. And then as the technologies improve, we would start looking at, when would it be possible to start replacing our larger utility vehicles in public works. So, those technologies are developing every year. It's getting closer and closer to providing the practical uses that we need to conduct public works operations. So we would, yes, so we could use this as we're looking forward for any of those types of purchases.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I want to thank Richard and Rob and Jennifer for their work on this. In their defense, I think this was only at our 2020 retreat. So I think it was only a year and a half ago. I could be wrong. And actually what kind of sparked this idea was when we were looking at the budget and we were talking about buying vehicles that weren't necessarily electric. So I'm happy to see, I'm happy with what's here. I hope that staff will, take these to heart and really apply this lens going forward. I think we're seeing with technology right now with the release of the Ford F-150 Lightning that there is a good chance that a lot of our needs, because we're not doing long haul driving, could be met through much cleaner means. So anyway, I just want to thank staff. I don't have any questions, but thank you so much for your work on this. I really appreciate it.
Councilmember Fox.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. Again, I want to thank the staff for your hard work on this. And looking at item 2 on this list, reduce the procurement of goods that contain and perpetuate use of toxics. Just to expand on that farther, to me, I want to make sure that this includes a reduction and reliance of toxic chemicals that we purchase or that we contract with others to purchase, with the exception of those that are authorized under King County use for certain tenacious invasive species. So could you provide clarification on that, please?
Sure. So you mean, like our integrated pest management plan and the IVMP that we actually just recently updated, again, we were kind of already thinking of a policy like this and using that lens. So as you recall, the IVMP, which was just recently adopted, we are putting the use, just instead of immediately going to the use of pesticides, for instance, we're going through this lens now and looking at other non-herbicide types of options for managing the noxious weeds in Lake Washington, Sammamish River, for example. So we are addressing it there kind of already before we have adopted this. So I think in terms of your questions for that example specifically, we have gone that route. And then I think Jennifer, you had mentioned in our other pest management plan, we've already kind of go that route as well. Do you want to provide any more detail on that?
Sure. So, that is actually really defines what a integrated pest management plan is you're, choosing mechanical, cultural, other means to take care of issues, whether it's weeds, insects, whatnot, first before you're choosing to go a chemical route. So that program's been in place since 2010. And we also have a green cleaning program at City Hall, town, or the hangar, and all of our parks. We've had that in place since 2010, and we use primarily all green chemicals for cleaning buildings, cleaning restrooms. It requires us to have recycled product, post-consumer recycled paper products for like our toilet paper, our paper towels, etc. So I guess I wanted to just reiterate that we have been doing a lot of these things for a long time, that even though there's not been an official policy, citywide policy to do those things.
Thank you. I want to thank you for that clarification. I think that helps carry our community with us in this work. And yeah, I'm sure that will make people feel a lot better back at home and when out in the community. And when you say green chemicals, I interpret that as you're talking about organics and herbicides. Organic or herbicides versus toxic chemicals. I just want to make sure there's a clarification for bringing our community with us.
So there's a couple different things we're talking about here. So cleaning chemicals are, definitely different from any pesticides. So for cleaning chemicals, the standard is the Green Seal products. And so we have been using those primarily, with the exception of disinfectants. Those are the one thing that is not Green Seal approved. There are very few Green Seal approved disinfectants. And as you know, with the pandemic, we're getting disinfectant as, it became available. We were just using whatever we could get our hands on, really. But our normal cleaning practices rely on Green Seal approved products. And I'm happy to provide more information on that to the council and to the community. And as far as, herbicides go, which is primarily what we do use, I guess I'm not sure exactly what you're asking as far as organic. What do you mean by organics?
So to our community, if many think of organics as, baking soda, vinegar, which are also considered chemicals and herbicides, but they look to those as the organic or green way first.
Well, I guess I wouldn't
sometimes confuses these.
Yes, it can be very confusing because those are, more they're called home remedies, I guess, not necessarily organic methods. There are definitely different, means, but any pesticide, whether there's organic products out there, anything used to kill something, weeds, insects, whatever, is a pesticide. That's the definition. So there's different products. There's organic products. There's, chemical products. And I think that part of this plan, although we haven't talked about it, is definitely public education and educating the community on what the difference is between those, different types of products that you're talking about.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Fowler, I see your hand is still up. You still have another question? Any other questions? If there are none, the chair will entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 21364, establishing a sustainable city government principles. Is there a motion?
So moved. Oh.
So moved.
Well, we got 3 moves.
So moved, Councilmember File.
Anybody seconding?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk, please take the roll.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, next item on the agenda is ordinance number 21-0. 525, extending the temporary moratorium on residential tenant eviction and adopting renter protection related to COVID-19, presented by our Community Development Director, Mrs. Bent.
Yes, and the city attorney is available too. She was actually wrote the ordinance and has answered several council member questions. So this evening, we have brought forward some information based on council direction to bring back legislation to extend the moratorium on residential tenant evictions and provide residential tenant protections necessary due to the COVID-19 pandemic. When the agenda packet was available to the public, we have received public comments from the Transit Riders Union, as well as from the Washington Multifamily Association, and those comments were provided in the packet. So staff is looking for direction this evening. You could adopt the ordinance that was originally in your packet, which was attachment 1. And if you adopt that tonight, it would become effective immediately. If council is interested in including any of the suggested amendments, we would like to know which ones you would like to include, and then staff would then rewrite the ordinance and the proclamation if necessary to include those amendments and bring those back to the June 28th meeting for council action. If council adopts a revised ordinance on June 28th, it would become effective immediately. So if you have any questions on the moratorium extension, on the provisions of the ordinance or proclamation, or any of the proposed amendments, I'm happy to take the questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yeah, so I'm thinking since there was 4 or 5 questions, comments from the 2 different groups, you might want to take them one at a time. I'm happy to start out with the one from the Transit Riders Union. I'm very comfortable removing that language. It does seem confusing. It is not within the language that Seattle's ordinance has either, so I'm not sure. And I guess this is my question before I make the proposal, is what was the rationale for including that? Because I wasn't quite sure.
I think the city attorney can answer that. It was included in the King County ordinance. You are correct. It is not included in the Seattle ordinance. It is also not proposed in the Kirkland ordinance, which is scheduled for council action tomorrow.
Okay, well then I don't need to ask anymore. I don't need to ask. I will go ahead and make the motion that we strike that language.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilmember Marshall.
I did have a question that I wanted to hear what the city attorney had to say on that matter.
Me, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yes, it was as Ms. Bent spoke. The language was provided in tenant defenses that the King County ordinance adopted. I inserted it as a form, but it's really a matter of policy. It's a policy choice on whether that should remain or not. So I defer to council on that.
So there's a motion in front of us to strike that language. Councilmember Marshall, you have more?
Yeah, I'm sorry. A brief follow-up on that with the city attorney. Did you think that since it's the case that unlawful detainer is generally construed against landlords, strictly construed against landlords, was that amendment, did you think that might provide some balance in terms of given the court discretion, or by the plain language without the amendment, does the court already have and will likely exercise discretion in looking at the defense and looking at the landlord situation as well?
I don't believe without the language that a court will necessarily look at hardship for the landlord. So if that's a policy choice, then the recommendation would be to leave it in. If the rationale actually was just in looking at again, King County as a template, I thought it was a reasonable approach, but reasonable, again, is a policy choice, meaning if in fact that waters down the council's desired policy adoption for this ordinance, then the recommendation is to remove it. I don't see an issue with that. But going back to what will a court do, it's my understanding that a court is going to look at the defense and apply it or not. And they always have the equity to look at circumstances presented before them. That language was just providing an additional factor for them to think about. Does that answer your question? Okay.
All right. Other questions? Oh, on your static image, I see your hand, Councilmember File.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. You know, and looking at this, I think the Section 3, Part C is written in a way that it, even though it's pulled from King County, and sometimes everybody tries to take a good attempt, right? It does seem confusing and a bit mucking. And so I would be comfortable with striking that Section 3, Part C and moving forward. I do also have some other concerns, but I think we should take one issue at a time.
All right, so there is a motion in front of us to strike language. Yes.
And just to clarify, there's
Attorney.
actually, thank you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, and I believe this is the intent of the motion, but again, to clarify, it's not just the language. I believe the comments related to Section 3, Part C, but also the mirror language that was found in the emergency rule for the moratorium. So the amendment would apply to both.
Councilmember Marshall, is it on the motion?
It is. If nobody else is to talk on the motion, I just wanted to speak my piece on it.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I would be highly in favor of language measuring the equities concerning the landlord and reiterating to the court that there should be fairness to all parties, including the landlord. I can foresee a lot of unintended consequences in which we have worst case scenarios. And that may be my orientation, certainly as an attorney, and having seen many cases in which things blow up, in which there are worst case scenarios. I wouldn't want to see small landlords suffer as a result of, say, a worst case scenario in which tenants are impacted initially by COVID and then have an opportunity to be able to actually go out and get work and actively seek to not get it in exploitation of a landlord. However, I think that we're still not far enough away from recovering from COVID, and this moratorium is for the up until September. So, and I think we also have the opportunity then, if we do have a worst case scenario where we see foreclosures beginning against landlords, and that resulting in, I've heard of, it's supposed to be something like the San Francisco housing market is the argument, that once small landlords are squeezed out by larger outfits, that itself drives prices up to insane levels that, you know, we're getting hit with now up here, but in San Francisco or elsewhere, other urban markets, it's a massive amount. We want to be able to keep an eye on that. But that said, I'm in favor of the motion.
All right, any other further discussion on the motion in front of us to strike that language? Madam Clerk, would you please read the motion?
Councilmember Shrubnik moved to strike the language referring to Section 3C and related mirror language in presented ordinance 210525. And Deputy Mayor Herbig seconded the motion.
And if there is no further discussion on that motion, will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
Mayor Baker.
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Motion passes.
7-0. All right. Any further discussion on, yes, Councilmember File.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. In consideration of the moratorium extension to the end of the month of September, I would like to propose that we consider extending that to the end of the month of October. And looking around at our surrounding city partners and things they are considering. I know on June 1st, Kirkland was considering or had requested, the council members had requested a 6-month moratorium. I think 6 months gets us in a little bit of a concerning situation. I feel more comfortable kind of backing it off just slightly. But looking at the lineup to the connective resources for funding assistance and the timeline for implementing those funding resources out to whether it's tenants or landlords, I think we might need just a couple more months for padding. And in consideration, our fellow council members had some discussion on this as well, where 3 months would be the minimum we'd want. Therefore, I'd like to request that we extend our moratorium till the end of October.
Yes, Mrs. Bent.
Thank you, Mayor. Just like to point out that the City of Kirkland proposed ordinance, which is scheduled for council action tomorrow, is proposing an extension to the end of September. The Seattle ordinance that was passed on June 7th did not include an extension, but a resolution was passed requesting that the mayor extend the moratorium further, and also there was a request sent to the governor to make that extension. So as of this evening, Seattle has still not extended the ordinance.
City Attorney, I know that the city has run into legal issues on moratoriums running too long in the past. Would this potentially fall within that window?
So, Mayor Baker, to the extent that you and the City Council would like me to discuss legal risks relating to this proposed action, I would recommend that we recess into an executive session under RCW 4230.110(1)(I) to discuss potential risks and liability. Should be done in executive session and not in public session.
Madam Clerk, if council chose to go into executive session, how difficult will it be to affect the meeting space?
I think that's a question for City Manager Carl Lindsay. I don't think that would be challenging.
Yeah, I can create the excuse me. I can create the link really quick.
Does council want to go into executive session to discuss the legality of this? Yes. I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding yes. So let's go ahead and do that. How long do we think, City Attorney?
I would say 30 minutes. Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
30 minutes.
It would be 30 minutes.
For 30 minutes. Yes.
And
so let's go ahead and go into executives. We will come out. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, just because
City
you're
Attorney.
Yes, thank you. Just because you're going in and out, I'm going to just recite the reason. Again, it would be to recess for potential litigation, which is under RCW 42.30.110, subsection 1I, for 30 minutes. I'm sorry, you're just cutting in and out. Thank you.
Yep, and so we will return at 8:55, excuse me, 9:55.
8:55, Mr. Mayor. It's only 8:24.
8:55, sorry about that.
Do we have a link? I'm sorry, I don't see it.
I'm just about to send it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're reading the link now.
Okay, I just sent it.
Will it be coming?
And I hope I included the appropriate staff members. Let me see. Yeah.
And just for the benefit of all our guests who are still with us, the council has now entered a closed executive session. This is for the purpose of discussing pending potential risk or liability or litigation. They plan to be in executive session for approximately 30 minutes.
So Madam Clerk, I'm still showing a couple of minutes left to go.
I'm with you, Mayor Baker.
All right, Kenmore City Council is now back in session. And no action will be taken. And we're back to discussing ordinance number 21-0525. Councilmember File.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Baker. You called on me, so I had made the recommendation that we extend our moratorium to the end of October. And so I'd like to make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion moved and seconded to extend the moratorium until October. Was that the 30th of October, Councilmember File?
October goes to the 31st, so end of October.
All right, is there any discussion on the motion in front of us to extend the moratorium to October 31st? Deputy Mayor.
I want to start off by saying that I recognize the importance that the moratorium has served as a tool to keep people housed during the pandemic. And I'm not opposed to us extending the moratorium as needed. I'm not sure if extending it right now into October makes the most sense to me, especially because we will have time in September. We'll have the whole month of September to evaluate how the rollout is going with the rental assistance funding and where the state of the pandemic is and where the state of the economy is and all of those things. And if need be, we have the chance in September to further extend the moratorium. So I'd rather take small steps as needed rather than taking big steps that we may have to roll back. I think that would be a lot harder for us to do. So I'm going to vote against this motion, not because I'm against the moratorium, but I think that we can extend it in September if the need is still there. You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Shrubnik, did you have your hand up initially?
I did, but Deputy Mayor Herbig made my point.
Fine. Councilmember Marshall?
Yeah, and I support the motion to October because I think that we'd be looking at getting past the beginning of the school year. And I think that's something we can take into account right now. And if need be, or if the circumstances change dramatically, reevaluate in the summer. But I think it's getting past the beginning of the school year, which would, at least now I can accept, would hopefully cause less disruption for families. Thanks.
Any other questions? Councilmember Fowle, I do see your hand up and I will come back to you. Any other questions? Councilmember Fowle.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. You know, as the maker of this motion, I support this motion because I see that we can help our community get past the reopening of the school year as we are returning to school and come back and are gathering back to work. We do not yet have herd immunity. There is a new variant and, you know, we learned about this in the news, June 12th. China reported the new, much more legendary Delta variant. London on the 14th reported the variant presence there. We are surviving and living in a time of a pandemic, and these are unusual times. I'm thinking about the time it takes to ensure that the connection of the supports, both for tenants and landlords, are in place in a reasonable timeline. I think it's just going to take a little bit more time. I'd rather give and provide our community the protections they need to be able to then have access to these resources. And looking back at history, I also look at pandemic responses in public health history. If we look at the polio pandemic and the polio health crisis, you know, that second year, that fall was historically a very deadly time. I'm concerned. More importantly, we do not have the housing and structure or the shelter structure to home the amount of homelessness that could happen. And for these reasons, I support this motion and I ask for your support.
Hearing none, the motion in front of us is to extend the moratorium through October 31st, 2021. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
I'm going to vote against it because the whole motion is to extend to October 31st, and I think the vote no means September 31st, September 30th, correct? Okay, no response.
I can respond to that. Councilmember Shremnick, my understanding of the motion is that is correct in that you already have an ordinance before you for September 30th, and the amendment was to extend it. So if the motion fails, the September 30th would remain.
So that's a no for Councilmember Shrubnik, correct?
Correct. Thank you. Sorry.
Mayor Baker?
No, because I think we have time to extend it once we have a little bit more solid footing to go on.
Councilmember Kugler?
I also vote no for the same reasons.
Councilmember Marshall?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
No.
Councilmember File?
Yes.
The motion fails.
All right, there are a number of other issues and potential amendments here. And we still have the main motion to be made in front of us to adopt 21-0525. And that motion needs to be made. Deputy Mayor?
I believe staff's intent, if we were making amendments, which we already did, would be to not actually make that main motion today, but to pass that on the 28th.
Exactly.
Okay.
Go ahead and get the different changes that we want in place so it can be brought back on the 28th. Is there any other changes that we want? Like there's a number of different attachments that are potentially under consideration. So, yes, Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yeah, I am not proposing we make any additional changes other than what we've already discussed here. And in particular, I want to underscore the part about landlord certification I feel is fundamental, and I don't want to erode that. Having worked in the rental assistance program for King County as 100% of my job for 2 months, this is particularly important. I worked on the small landlord / tenant side as opposed to the large landlord side. And, north of 90% of those applications, 100% of the rent that was owed was paid. The vast majority. There is little to no reason for landlords not to take advantage of this. And there's much more money than there was back then available. So I really feel strongly that the requirement for attempting to access this resource is critical.
All right. So we're happy with that minus the one change that we've already made. Is there a motion then to direct staff to move forward and bring this back to us on the 28th?
Point of information.
Yes.
Is there any reason why we can't move on the item with the amendment as proposed?
No, I don't believe there is any. City Attorney, is there any reason that we can't?
No, Mr. Mayor, with the limited amendments, I think the recommendation to wait to the 28th was thinking there would be a lot of amendments that needed to be added. But with such a discrete amendment, there is nothing to prevent the council if that's their choice.
So then the chair, if that is the direction of council, the chair would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance number 21-0525 minus the change that's already been made.
So moved, Councilmember File.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Deputy Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yes.
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Mayor Baker.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is the staff report. Mr. City Manager, Public Works and the site search, I believe, update with Mrs. Gordon and Mr. Sawyer.
I'll turn the time over to them if that's okay, Your Honor.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so did everyone get a copy of the memo that Richard and I submitted? I apologize for it being so late. So many different moving parts. So I think we got it all figured out. So I just wanted to briefly go over where we're at right now and kind of next steps, timeline for the next month or so. Richard and I, after the April 19th council meeting, when the site selection criteria was signed off by you all, we started doing the GIS analysis right away with phase 1. So we started out with 7,707 properties. Through phase 1, which was evaluating usable property, the property configuration, known adverse environmental conditions, serving a current public service, mobile home parks, and the strategic civic investment area. So we whittled it down to 201 properties in phase 1. Phase 2, which the criteria for phase 2 was access, and then the cost of land, existing buildings, and if we were doing any demo or tenant improvements or new building type of cost associated with that. And through phase 2, we came out with 79 properties. And then during the process of this site selection process, 2 properties became kind of known and available as 2 willing sellers. And so it kind of like put a little kink in our process, and wasn't exactly to plan, but I think it was really important for us to move quickly and to take a look at these 2 properties that the council has given us the go ahead to enter into a purchase and sale agreement. And so, well, we want to make sure that we are going through this feasibility period and looking at the possibilities of these properties as a fit for our public works shop site. We do not want to stop, the selection process. So we're moving forward. We've got 2 kind of parallel processes going on at the same time. We're going to look at these properties that we have. Well, one has a purchase and sale agreement, and the other is in the works. And then we'll continue on with phase 3, which is looking at, a more fine-tooth comb with environmental impacts and whether or not the property is part of a larger group of properties. Richard and I have about finished phase 3. I think we are going to maybe do a little bit of additional work, but we think we've narrowed it down to 55 properties, which is really a lot more than we anticipated we would have at the end of phase 3. So that's also something that just wasn't anticipated, but we're going to go with the 55. Later this week, we're going to send out letters to the property owners of those 55 properties to let them know about our process and why they're getting a letter from us, letting them know that their property is a possible site for the public works yard, but that, there's still a lot more process to come, and we will be holding a couple open houses in July for anyone to come forward to ask questions. Come forward if there's more willing sellers. We'd love to hear from them. And so we're going to be holding a couple open houses, one for the second week of July, and then I think another one the third week of July. And we're going to try to do one during the daytime hours, and then another one during the nighttime hours. So try to get as much participation as we possibly can. And then meanwhile, we'll hopefully get some information and have those feasibility studies completed for you. So on the evening of July 26th, we can come back and present all the information to the council to see what direction they want to go in next.
And if I think Jen may have mentioned it, but just to make sure it's to drive the point home, the group of properties that we are under purchase and sale agreement with are also, they did make it through this phase as well. So these were properties that we've identified. They weren't coming in from outside the process. So that was also very fortunate.
So I'll take any questions here. You're muted.
Councilmember Shoreline.
Well, Jennifer, I just want to really thank you for this work, and Richard. And particularly, given that there's quite a few more properties that have made through phase 3, I know that's a lot more work. And I just think the transparency that we tried to put into place with the criteria and that we talked about at previous meetings, I really appreciate your willingness to kind of hang in there, given the extra workload. That's really appreciated. I had one small question, and that is, in the letter that's going out to those properties, are we also mentioning that, even though it's of course been said here, that we have a purchase and sale agreement on a property, that might help them feel a little more at ease as well? I don't know whether that's going to be included or not.
I mean, we haven't written the letter yet, but I think that we want to include all of the information we possibly can. One of the things I didn't mention is in the memo that we plan to put all of the information on the website, hopefully by the end of this week, so that, I mean, we want to be completely transparent. We want all the information to be out there. And so we're going to try to overload everyone with information. So yes, the plan is to have that information included in the letter.
Thanks a lot.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. Thank you again for your hard work and effort on all this. I know it took a considerable amount of time and effort on your parts, and also to the original committee that put together the outline plan. I do have a question. When the original site was selected, the Chaitapong family property, we learned there were educational, cultural, business practices in 3 generations of family, diverse family that were unknown to our council member, our council majority as prior understood. It has come to my attention that even through the evidence practice and procedure, and even though we pulled back from that, the city themselves chose to pull back from that, I want to make sure that this site was not in this pool of selection. Is it in the pool?
We did not eliminate any properties that were, that first phase were really the only limiting factors. So it's been put through the process, and I believe it is. Richard, is it in, I don't know if it passed phase 3 or not.
I don't have it open in front of me, so I can't say for certain, but we did not exclude any properties based on our previous attempts to acquire them. But if they do get filtered through, what we have added to this process is first the public notice before. So right now, if they're still in the running, they're going to get notified. And then phase 5 allows council and potential properties more time to have those conversations and discussions so that you can make a decision before we reach a point of, hey, we want your property. This process, phase 5, will allow you to have those conversations before that step.
Thank you for answering that. And I want to make sure it's clear that I am very uncomfortable with that property continuing to be on a selective criteria pathway or up for consideration. I believe we learned enough as a council from our community and our partners that it seems inappropriate to myself, my personal opinion, but more so unless they are wanting to put their property up for sale individually, and that is part of the criteria options. That's the only way I would want to have that property listed on a piece of paper come back to us. So I would be very comfortable making a motion to eliminate the property for consideration unless they themselves want to sell their property.
Well,
And I'd hope for a second for that.
I think Jennifer, as far as Jennifer and I are concerned, we're willing and happy to follow any direction that council provides us in regards to what properties council wants to consider.
Thank you. Well, I did make a motion and I would hope for a second.
Councilmember Kugler?
I had more of a comment, so I'll wait and see if it passes.
I'm not hearing a second, so the motion will die for lack of second. Councilmember Kugler?
I wasn't on the council when this whole conversation, happened, so I don't have all of the background information. But I do feel like we did address this when we approved the process. So I think it's really important that we follow through with the process as we approved it, and let the staff consider all of the properties within our city using the process that we already vetted and approved.
Councilmember File, do you have another question? Your hand's up, I see.
I don't have another question, but I will make a closing response on that. Given that what we learned through the cultural aspects of the business and its impact on our community and how they were serving our community, as well as the diversity, equity, education, art and culture part of it, I believe I stand firmly behind my conviction on this, and I'm sad and just a little bit dismayed and disheartened, but I'd hope that council partners would be with us on this. We've been through this once. I certainly wouldn't want to go through it a second time. But that being said, I want to stand behind our commitment to diversity and equity practices and our commitment to that work, also our commitment to our community. So I just want to make sure that's a good closing remark, and that's not a judgment. It is my strong concern on our devotion to our practices on diversity and equity, inclusion, and how we work together with our surrounding partners. Thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, I concur with Councilmember File and in the need to recognize the diversity equity issues, and in fact, I mean, working on this criteria with a couple of other council members that are here, that what we learned during that process really drove the development of those criteria so that we wouldn't be displacing, property owners that, are really providing cultural benefit or have a cultural history in the area. And, the Chi-Patanawan properties certainly would have, if we had this criteria back then, would have fallen out based on the criteria. So I feel confident, quite confident actually, that sticking with the process, we will be meeting those goals. I think we're all on the same page with the goals.
All right. There's nothing else. Thank you, Mrs. Gordon and Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. City Manager, is anything further from you?
No.
All right, council comments, reports. Let's start with Councilmember File.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. I have no comment for tonight.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes, I want to express my appreciation for the mayor's at least contemplating a tree moratorium. I have to admit the idea is novel, even to me, but I'm very much interested in it. Obviously, we wouldn't consider or undertake something without due consideration for all the rights involved. There's certainly, we'd want to include staff and talk about any impact on development, litigation risks, anything like that. But I'd definitely be interested in hearing about it at some future meeting.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, I concur. I think it'd be interesting to explore. No reports. I did have a question based on, I believe, something that a few of us have brought up, which is to have our consultants brief the council in public session about the what they're learning about the asphalt plant emissions, and to have that be as timely as possible. So that's just a sort of a request because I don't know where that's at.
Councilmember Kugler.
Just a few comments. I want to thank staff again for proposing the purchasing of the green products. I didn't realize that was a conversation that you had and started a year and a half ago. So I'm glad that they're bringing that forth and kind of moving forward with that. I also want to thank all of the residents who shared citizen comments tonight. I thought there were a lot of really great points and ideas brought up. I hope that we will revisit the idea of all gender restrooms at the hangar, at our perhaps city hall or any public buildings that we own or facilities. And then I also wanted to mention that Mark Van Wormer, who's the board chair of Camp Unity, he offered to give a tour of Camp Unity before they pack up and move out of the city of Kenmore. If any other council members are interested in joining me for that, we're going to try to schedule that on Friday or Saturday of this week. So go ahead and shoot me an email if that interests you. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Trying to think what has happened. It's been a couple weeks. Seashore is sending a letter to the Sound Transit Board about the importance of 522 BRT. I was also part of a meeting with representing Kenmore with kind of East Side mayors. Mayor Baker was there representing Sound Transit, so I was there representing the city, and got an update on the realignment. We got to ask questions of Peter Rogoff and Sound Transit staff, and really push them on some of the BRT proposals that are being tossed around as they realign the Sound Transit 3 projects. So there's a lot of moving parts still going on with that. I am planning to testify on Kenmore's behalf at the meeting that's coming up, I think on the 24th. Yeah, the 24th, about 522 BRT and keeping that schedule, getting that built as soon as possible, not pushing it back as some of the plans are showing. So that's my update. Thank you very much. Good meeting.
A couple of things that Mrs. Grayland mentioned, epidemiological study in cancer. And I will be bringing this up at the Board of Health on Thursday. I'm going to try and find out if there's been any epidemiological studies, certainly within 5-mile radius. And if so, what types of cancer, what types of issues have been found. So we will see what kind of help we can get from King County Board of Health on that. Also, I don't know if anyone in the council has noticed, I know it's been an issue that we've had for a number of years, but Best Friends of Coffee is closed. They have gone away. There is a young lady who currently has a coffee shop up on Highway 9, and it's a very interesting tie to Kenmore. She was raised here in Kenmore, and her mother bakes homemade cinnamon, pecan, blueberry, and breakfast buns right here in Kenmore for sale in the shop. And she would like to come in and have a woman-owned business here in Kenmore. And so I have been trying to work with her and with St. Vinny's to see if we can't get her into that old best friend's place and make a turnaround. It was certainly to find that other than that, I have nothing further to add. So thank you all very much. It's a good one. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.